Good morning, gentlemen. We have got a little project this morning. We are going to replace the master cylinder on a Chevy Silverado 2500HD pickup truck. Drivability is actually perfect. I would never even have known that there was a problem until I walked out to take the trash out and noticed in my wheel well that I've got a lot of wet spots in it. Let's get in there and you can see along the wheel well here where it's dripped down and the shock is all wet as well as the frame. So when I put my hand underneath the master cylinder, I get a very wet hand. So that's the deal today, and I don't think it's overly complicated. I'll show you my parts that I picked up here on Saturday, yesterday actually. So master cylinder, I opted to buy a new master cylinder rather than a remanufactured. New one was $90, remanufactured was $15 less, something like that. And there's a core charge on the remanufactured. When you buy a new one, there is no core. So I'm going to empty the brake fluid out of the old master cylinder before I trash it, so that I don't have brake fluid all over the trash can and in the environment and all that stuff. So here's the master cylinder. While I was at the parts house, we did unbox it, walk it out to the truck, and just make sure that everything looked exactly the same way as it was on the truck. And I also purchased for like $5. This is I guess a one-man bleeder system, you might say. The kid at the counter was telling me about it. I get home and I don't really understand how it works completely right, so I read through the instructions. It says, and I quote, allows one person to quickly and easily bleed air from brake lines. Okay. Oh, steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We get down to, and it says, pump the brake pedal slowly until pedal pressure becomes hard. While holding the brake pedal, open the bleeder screw. Check hose for air bubbles. Well, that is a physical impossibility, so I don't know exactly what it is that's intended here. I'm going to experiment a little bit about it. Maybe in China they just write crappy documentation, which is generally the case, so I don't know exactly how that's going to work. I may just go old school and get some help from my wife, right? She can pump the pedal and I'll go break the bleeder screws down at each wheel. We'll get into that later. Also snatched a big bottle of fresh brake fluid, and I don't know how much we're going to use, but look at the side by side, right? It's going to use quite a bit of this, and of course we're going to have to bleed it, and we will lose some of that fluid during that process, so I hope I have enough. All right, wire comes out first. I'm using a 9/16 flare nut wrench, and it's specifically made for getting off flare nuts that are around tubing. If you don't have one, just use a regular 9/16 to get it off. Just be careful. There are two nuts holding the master cylinder onto the brake booster, one on this side, one on the other side, and it's right back here. And both those are pretty clear, right? It's not going to be a whole lot of drama getting those off, just with an extension and a ratchet. All right, so I got a bit of bad news here. So it doesn't look like it's the master cylinder is the problem. So if I look at this really closely, you can see here, it would be leaking from here. And this is bone dry. My finger isn't even damp. I haven't wiped this with a rag or anything. So that it suggests to me that it's not the master cylinder. But what it is probably this brake booster, as some component has failed within it. And I can see now that I have it apart, there's this channel that runs down the bottom here, and it's all wet in here, and it looks like the fluid has been leaking out through this channel between where the master cylinder and the booster come together. So while I was at the parts house yesterday, I thought maybe the booster could be the problem. I hadn't fully diagnosed it yet without taking it apart. And I asked them, just in case, what's the part cost? $180, right? So I mean, almost, almost $300 here. So I'm going to give them a call. Hopefully they had that on the shelf. I don't really remember. I cannot do anything with this truck as it sits right now. It has no brakes. So here goes. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to take the new master cylinder back. I'm still going to install it. This is a 2001. That puts this thing at 17 years old. I've got it all apart. I've monkeyed with it, so forth, and I just don't want to have those problems. I don't want to have to get in here and do this again when the master cylinder eventually fails. I did run up underneath the driver's side and looked up underneath the dash to see what it entailed, and there are 4 bolts. They're mildly easy to get to, not too bad, and then there's this component that's connected to the brake pedal that you can actually see the fluid coming through there, right? It's a little damp around, it's way up underneath and it's a little damp, so I got some discovery, I think, still to do there. You can see where the brake fluid is seeped back, and it has touched that rod that activates the electronics for brake lights and whatnot, right? There's the other bolt, right? So yeah, it could be worse, but it also could be a whole lot better too. So I'm really looking forward to that. I don't even know how I'll be able to film this, right? So that's why I'm in here now, and that's next step. Parts House has the brake booster. It is $180 plus a $40 core. I'm so pleased by that. I'm going to take off both inputs and outputs from the power steering. That's where the booster gets its power from, and the I guess this is a return, or I don't know, some kind of hose or something. It's not pressurized, I know that much. So 3 hoses come off. Right, so nearly impossible to film this. So one clip holds everything together, right? So you've got the push rod that goes to the booster, back to the brake pedal, and there is an electronic component there. I didn't unplug the electronic component, I just allowed everything to sort of come undone right after I removed the clip, so it's kind of hanging there. Now what I'm going to do is there are 4 bolts holding the booster on through the firewall. I'm going to work on the toughest bolts first, which are the top and bottom on the passenger side, then come back over and do the driver's side. This is the old one. Here's the new one. There is a retainer clip, a rod, and a spring inside of that. This stuff has to come out and install into here. There's a machined lip inside, and that's what's holding sort of that star pattern in there. So the spring is under tension. That means that has to be relieved in order to even begin to remove that clip. So the question is how am I going to do that? Alright, so the good news is that when I push down in this thing, it's not maybe as stout as I was expecting it to be. So I can manipulate this with my hand. Right now it's a little bit crooked, and I think that'll work to my advantage. If I can hook this up underneath, I think it'll start to come out of the... Okay, watch yourself in case this thing wants to come flying out. Not sure I have full control here. If I can get these lifted up out of that slot, yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to get this thing in the face. There's no lie about that. There's probably some easy way to do this. I tried to find it, and I don't know what it is. That's my problem. It's unbelievable they don't reinstall this on the new part. I mean, it's just so stupid. I mean, it's like you need a special tool, right, to compress the spring to take the tension off. It makes no sense. God, I'm afraid I'm going to get this in the face and get the cameraman too. This is the bottom, and it has this sort of this drain that's been carved out in the casting, right? And I don't believe this is the right way to get this off, but I'm going to use it to my advantage. I've already got 2 of the prongs loose, and this is the way I do it. But if you look over here at the new part, right, there is no, that doesn't exist. So I don't know exactly how you get this thing out, but it seems to be working. So if I take a socket and I relieve the tension on the spring, and then if I pry out on this a little bit and then give it a spin and get that thing to pop out and give it a spin. Okay, I think that's 3 of them if I'm not mistaken. See, so now it's harder to turn, a good bit harder to turn. Okay, here it comes. Watch it, watch it. Yeah. And that's how that goes. All right, that went about 10 feet. After the spring comes out, then we've got this push rod, and there's a nylon washer in there. It just falls right out. It's not even connected, right? So now this guy is ready to go back to the parts house. Supposed to catch on the outermost lip, but ooh, that's in too far. All right, I got it. So this comes out. Oh man, the whole thing moved. That's good. That's actually what I want it to do. That one goes like that. This one comes up. It's too far in. Okay, that's good. That will work. It's perfect. It's perfect, and I didn't utterly destroy this while I did all this manhandling with it. All right, check it out. Very hard to see. Back this up some. You can see the light coming off of this ring right here, right there. There's actually a lip, and I just couldn't see that at all. Let me see if I can get the light right. There's a lip right there. And that's what these fingers catch on and causes it to retain the spring. And man, I just didn't see that because of the way the light is, right? I mean, it's just this little tiny thing. I had to go check the other part in order to confirm that. But right where that finger is touching in the bore, there is a ridge. All right, that's it. Now I can put this thing back together. Jesus, let's do it. So the new booster is in and tightened up. I still got to do the lines, of course. All right, well, since I didn't film the actual removal and reinstallation from inside the passenger compartment, at least I can show you the tools that I used, which was actually ended up to be pretty simple, but you're doing a lot of swapping as you go, because each of the 4 bolts holding it in, you only have certain clearances. There's a big bracket up underneath there. The pedal is in the way, all kinds of junk, right? So to get it out, you start off with a deep, and then you eventually go to a shallow in order to get the clearance for the wrenches and the tools and whatever combination that you happen to be using. And then during the installation, it's actually the reverse. So you start with the shallow, you end up with the deep, because there's a long post on there, and you can't avoid that. So I found myself doing a lot of that kind of work. Regular ratchet, I started with air, and that wasn't working for me. It was just too much, with trying to get the hose and everything up underneath there. It just wasn't working. And then 1, 2, 3 extensions plus this little stubby. If you don't have a spinner, I would recommend you get one. I bought this one when I was a teenager back in the day. This thing, I've had it ever since. And I purchased this one. This is a ratcheting spinner that I got from O'Reilly here just within the last 2 to 3 years. I love it, but it's a little more bulky than this one, right? So whenever I could, I had to swap, back and forth and use both. So, but I prefer this one if I can if I have the space. And you can see here it pops open. Let's see if I can do this with one hand. It gets this handle thing going, so you can grab it like this, right, and turn like that. And it's ratcheting, like I said. It's just turn this knob and it'll righty tighty or lefty loosey. That's how it works. Cool. Gotta be careful with these things, boy. They strip fast. Master cylinder needs to be bench bled, so I'm going to put some fluid in it, and then I'm going to manually work the piston back and forth until we start to get some fluid coming out of the ports here. It's just a gigantic mess, right? I'm going to do everything I can to try and control that, and be careful with anything painted around here because the stuff's corrosive. This master cylinder happens to have two flats on it right here, so it fits into the vise really, really great, and you're not trying to grip something that's round, cylindrical, so that's really good. Yeah. Alright. God, if I can hit the bike. God, the shit went all over it. My God. All right, first things first, what I want to do is bring the booster online. What I've done is I've topped up the power steering reservoir. Procedurally, what you're supposed to do is disable the engine from starting, and then you crank it, you crank it, you crank it, you crank it. I don't know how to do that. I don't want to look it up. I don't want to figure it out. I have done work on this power steering before, and I didn't do all that, so I know eventually that this thing will come back online. And then after you do all that, you're supposed to re-enable the ability of the truck to start. You start it up, then you go from stop to stop, back and forth, all the while looking at the level in the reservoir for the power steering, and you top it up and you maintenance that, right? So that's what it is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start this thing up. I'm going to let it run, just let it sit for a little bit. And then I am going to go stop to stop to stop to stop, and hopefully I have one steering. I will probably press the brake maybe once or twice, kind of test that out. There's loads of air in this thing right now, right? So then we're going to bleed the brakes. So to my great surprise, I actually have perfect steering, no problem whatsoever. I did go stop to stop, as I mentioned, and have no issues there. I did test the pedal. I actually have somewhat of a pedal. That sort of implies that the booster's coming online. I don't really know yet. We've got air in there and you really can't tell, so a lot of variables. So now it's time to bleed the brakes, and back to that little tool that I showed in the beginning. So we'll see how this all works out. All right, I am on the right rear tire. What I want to do is I want to start from the farthest away from the master cylinder and work my way closer. So right rear, right front, left front, in that order is how I'm going to bleed them. 10 millimeter is that bleeder screw, by the way. I mean, it's an American made, or isn't it, right? I mean, I couldn't get a standard to fit, no way, no how, so here goes. First problem, that doesn't fit at all. Fuck. Okay, what a joke that little kit was. That won't even come close to having the right size tubing or an adapter that will actually fit this bleeder screw right. This is just not going to happen. What I happen to have online is some stuff that's too big. And I think that if I sort of control it, right, I won't get a bunch of brake fluid in the face. And I don't want it all over the driveway and the wheel and the caliper and all these other things, right? So I'm going to feed that into a catch can. Let's see how it goes. So I've got Michelle up in the driver's seat. The truck is turned off, and I'm going to give her instructions about what I want her to do. So just listen, and we'll take it from there. So I'm going to yell to her, and I'm going to say, pump it up. And what she's going to do is sit in the driver's seat with the truck off, and she's going to pump that pedal 3, 4, 5 times, right? And then I'm going to tell her to hold it. She's going to put pressure on the pedal, and then I'm going to break the bleeder screw open. The air/brake fluid is going to exit through the tube that I've sort of held over this bleeder screw, and then I'm going to tighten it up. Then we're going to do it again and again and again until we get no air bubbles and just pure fluid. All the while watching the level in the master cylinder to make sure that I don't run that dry. I've got lots in there, so I'm not too worried about that, but I will check it. Ready to go?
Yeah.
Hold on a sec. Pump it up. Hold it. Is it to the floor?
Yeah.
Pump it up. Hold it. Oh, shit. To the floor?
It never went any further.
Okay, is it to the floor now? Pump it up. Hold it. To the floor. Do it one more time. It's the brake fluid is that I'm seeing is old. Yeah. Pump it up. Hold it.
Here we go.
Down to the floor.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna keep going because this is some nasty brake fluid coming out of here. All right, time for a test drive. So just started her up. I got a nice firm pedal. I just dropped her into reverse. It's holding, no problem whatsoever. Feels very, very normal to me. So let's go for a ride. I did top up the reservoir and double checked and tightened all of the bleeder screws. Got some really nasty brake fluid out of there. It was dark, looked almost like motor oil, whereas brake fluid out of the container, you know, it's almost clear, maybe with a little yellow tinge to it. All right, test again. Oh yeah, feels really good. Okay, so for a final step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this sit. I work from home, so I'm not going to drive this truck for probably the week unless I run an errand or something. I am going to spray the area below the master cylinder down with some engine degreaser and let that sit for a little bit, then I'll hose it off. We're getting ready to go on a road trip for vacation this summer, and that was a big motivator for me to get this handled pretty quickly. So, and I like to do that well before we leave so that any problems I can work that out, because I got to check for leaks, right? And I need to get this thing cleaned up so that I can see if it is in fact leaking or not. So that's what sort of things that were running around in my mind. That'll give me a week to get it straightened out if I have any more problems. I've still got another weekend to work on it if I have to, but I'm very pleased with it. It feels very, very normal. The steering is working perfect, no problem whatsoever. Got a green light here, just when you want a green, you know, oh, there we go, yellow. Yeah, it feels completely normal coming up from 45 miles an hour down to 0. It's absolutely normal. Driving this truck for a long time, I know what it feels like. Perfect. So we'll get rid of all that residual brake fluid and go out of town. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you'd like. Thumbs up me if you like. If you have any questions, or if you saw when I did that brake booster, you know, I just didn't have that quite right, just let me know, right? Just stick it in the comments, or, you know, some kind of input or something like that. Appreciate it. Thanks. Bye.